Today, I'm going to be sharing with you guys how I feel about buying, renting, or saving for a condo/apartment making $100K in Toronto. So this whole idea came about when I recently got an increase to my annual salary that finally brought me to that infamous six-figure mark. That was something that I always had in the back of my mind ever since I started my career. And secondly, well, the city is stupidly expensive. And I must say, I am genuinely proud about myself, just given that I had been laid off from my corporate job a few years back during the pandemic time, and I seriously had doubts during those times whether or not I could ever get back to this salary range. And I questioned my own abilities, like did I really get that job from sheer luck, or did I actually have the necessary skills to do that job, and that I was going through a setback period in my life. And now looking back, maybe it was just a little bit of both. For disclaimer, the intention of this video, or why I'm even showing my salary in the title, is not to flex on you guys about how much money I make, other than maybe I wanted a more clickbaity title for more viewership, but really it's to show you guys that despite making six figures or hitting that ceiling, that I can still see personally how financially challenging it can be to really thrive out in this city. And this may even sound a little bit bizarre, just given that it's $100K. And that's why I want to say that in no way, shape, or form am I complaining about my living situation. In fact, I'm probably doing relatively well for someone in my age group. And I understand that there are people in the city of Toronto, individuals or even family, who may be earning even less than I am. And believe me, as a person that comes from immigrant parents, I do know how challenging it can be to earn a living. Anyways, let's get into the video on how I feel about these different areas, and I'll touch near the end about my investment strategies going forward. So if this sounds good with you, do me a favor, smash the like button, ring that notification bell, and now let's begin. We're gonna start off with renting in Toronto because this is the area that I'm most familiar with, just given that I have been renting in the city over the last decade. And secondly, according to the 2021 consensus, nearly half the residents out in Toronto live in rental housing. Looking at this chart from rentals.ca, in February 2024, we have a one bedroom going for $2,500 and a two bedroom going for $3,300 in Toronto, while the national average for a one bedroom is going just under $2,000 and a two bedroom for $2,300. So now I want to show you all an approximate amount of what I take home each paycheck living out here in Toronto. And as you can see, on a bi-weekly basis, my net paycheck comes out being $2,700. And what does this tell you exactly? Well, essentially, as you're imagining, one paycheck is going directly to my one bedroom apartment that goes for $2,500 a month. And you right now may be as shocked as I was. Like, really, does someone making $100K in the city of Toronto only enables them to live somewhat financially comfortable by renting out a one bedroom? So one of their paycheck is going towards their one bedroom apartment/condo? And the answer is yes, because that's essentially where our economy is at with our housing situation. And before you start thinking it's a Toronto thing or even a Vancouver thing, let me remind you that the national average that I shared for a one bedroom across Canada is still $2,000 a month, which means that sure, if you're making $100K, you just have slightly more buffer at the end of it. So fortunately for me, my rental unit is way below today's market rate, and it's because I was able to secure it a couple years back. And it does help that my unit, or my building rather, was built prior to 2018, so it is rent control. But there are days that I question, like, what if my landlord wanted to reclaim this unit by having themselves move in, a family member move in, or simply they just want to sell this unit altogether? Where exactly does this leave me? And I kind of just thought about my scenarios. I could either go to market rates, like find and move somewhere else and pay $2,500 a month, which I don't think I would do. Find a roommate, which I've been there, done that, don't want to do. Or do I like really consider just moving provinces again and maybe going to Calgary? You can even make the argument that there's not much certainty when renting a condo from a landlord out here. But that's why it's so important to save your money in the city of Toronto, isn't that right? You might be thinking, well, one of my safest options would be to save as much money as possible. Have 6 months of emergency funds in the event that I lose my job and I have to dip into savings. Or maybe, if I'm even lucky, save enough money for a potential down payment. And the troubling part about saving money in Toronto is that most of your money goes towards your rent already. Like I said earlier, one of your paychecks already is going towards your rent, if not even more. The crazy part about this is that this is actually one of the better stories. Like, I literally know of some people who pay 3/4 of their monthly net income going directly to the rent, which means only 1/4 of it is going to their essential items. And that's why it's very, very unfortunate when you hear that Canadians are literally living paycheck to paycheck Roll the clip.
New Leger poll finds 47% of Canadians are going paycheck to paycheck. That number rises when you look at some different age groups. Nearly half of those under 35 also say they're worried about losing their job.
And personally, I've actually been part of that statistic. Like, believe it or not, the initial first 6 months when I first moved back to Toronto from Calgary, I was basically living paycheck to paycheck. And why, you may ask? Because I was making 65K a year, which is a pretty decent amount, but my rent was $1,750 a month. And sure, like, I knew going into the city that I was going to get a pay bump the following year, but don't get me wrong, I definitely faced my share of stress, whatever you want to call it. Here's what I've also noticed about the amount of money that I was able to save over the years relative to people of my age group or my peers in Toronto. And by all means, I'm not complaining, it's just something that I've noticed, but I noticed that many of them have lived at home a lot longer. And from doing so, and there's no shame to it, they have saved a lot more money for example, for a potential down payment. Versus someone like me who has been renting over the last decade, it's a lot harder for someone like me to also pay for rent and also save enough money for a potential down payment. Now, obviously, there are pros and cons with living with your parent or living on your own, but generally speaking, you can save thousands of dollars from spending a few extra years living at home, assuming that you have a good relation with your parents. At this point, there's still probably a small chance that you might still be thinking, but as a six-figure earner, you should be able to afford a one-bedroom condo out here in Toronto, right? And sort of, because I did run the numbers. I actually talked to a mortgage broker because I just was curious, and I asked them, like, hey, if I want to buy a 500K condo out here, like, what am I looking at? And they told me that I'm gonna have to put a 20% down payment, which is a 100K, already insane. But after everything's all in, including maintenance fees, it's gonna be about $3,000 monthly, using an interest rate about 5.5% at the time of this recording. But yeah, let that sink in, $3,000 monthly. According to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, your housing cost shouldn't be more than 32% of your gross income. So looking at a monthly gross of $8,333 for a six-figure earner in Ontario, no more than basically $2,650 a month should go towards housing when calculating your GDS ratio for a rough estimate, which essentially is a one paycheck at $2,700, which does sort of align with what lenders are willing to offer. So there definitely are people in the city of Toronto who own their own condo on their own despite making less than 100K a year. And how exactly do they do this? This is something that I always been wondering for the longest time, because it doesn't really make sense. Like, for example, if you're just a regular teacher making regular teaching salary, that doesn't really correlate you to buying a 500K condo or buying $1 million house. But despite all this, people still do this. And the answer is something that not a lot of people are going to tell you unless they're like close to you or whatever. But the answer is people often get gifts from parents that they're obviously not going to be shouting on top of their rooftops. It feels like it's almost next to impossible to do a down payment without the help of your parents or someone that's willing to lend you some money. Like, really think about it for a second. When you first graduate out of school, say you have like about 50K of debt. And when you graduate out of school, unless you're some sort of doctor or something, you're going to probably be making like regular business money anywhere between like, what, 60K max. And then think about it, you're gonna have to also save, so pay off that debt and also save enough money, like 100K for a down payment. It just seems almost next to impossible. Last but not least, I wanted to provide some actionable investment strategies that have helped me over the years in saving up some money in Toronto despite the high cost of living. My number one would simply have to do with just not getting so wrapped up about lifestyle and inflation. Like, seriously, it didn't really matter to me if I was making minimum wage, 40K, 60K, and now 100K. I always just tried to remember my days of university where I had virtually no money. Like, I still remember when I would finish an exam and I would have the simplest pleasure of going to the food court and buying food there, because in my mind, I was like thinking, I don't have to make food and I save time because I don't have to cook food. Those who know me well would say I would be a little bit too hypocritical to say that I didn't lifestyle inflate at all over the years. But let's be real, I used to live in a basement suite with like mice, or when I was doing laundry with bugs on the ground. But these are all important because what I do is, like, I remember these days where my back was against the wall. Number two is something that has really helped me over the last few years, and that was learning how to invest money and then putting that money into like an index fund like the S&P 500. I always hear this thing from like the finance bros telling me that I should have been investing from like the day that I was born. And that works for some people, but like I feel like for a lot of people like myself, you kind of have to be in the right mindset to be investing in the first place. Like for me, it wasn't until I actually had money sitting in my savings account that I actually had to think where should I use this money, or how could I leverage this in a better way? And finally, number 3 would be to continuously learn and hone on your skills on the job. Originally, I was going to be one of those entrepreneur people and be like, get a side hustle. But I know that's a lot easier said than done. But I will say that if you continuously learn, good things will happen over the years, and it will just kind of like compound. But I will say I am very fortunate that I have a YouTube channel. It's monetized. It's not making all that much, or I don't have that many subscribers, but I do want to thank each and every single one of you, because I do feel very privileged to have this channel in the first place. So anyhow, with that said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed my take on buying, renting, or saving for a condo/apartment out in Toronto. I know that the cost of living has been a major discussion point in recent years, and I'm hoping by sharing my story, this can help out anyone else that's going through the same financial challenges that comes along with living in the major cities. And as always, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I'll try to make more videos like this if you found it insightful, so let me know in the comment section down below, and I guess I'll see you guys all in the next one. Peace.